In this video, I'm going to break down how you can choose and hit your fitness goals faster than ever before with less effort. And if you've been someone who has been going to the gym or you've been working out and you're not really seeing the results that you want to see despite the effort, you might be a little bit frustrated. And that's totally normal. And what I typically see is a lack of clarity. And so that's what this video is going to be all about, is giving you a tool and a system to be able to understand what type of goal you have and why that goal is important to you. Once you have that, then in future videos, we'll be able to break down how to build your workout program, how to build your nutrition program, how to stay motivated, how to stay inspired, keep working. And so let's dive into this training right here on how to hit your goals faster, with less time and effort. Sounds like a big win for me. Sounds like a big win for you. Let's get into it. So I'm going to give you an analogy to start it off with. Who graduates first in this example? We'll start it off. First guy, we'll call this guy Bill. All right. Bill's trying to do law school, med school, and be an astronaut at the same time. Now you're probably thinking, that sounds dumb, like a lot of time and effort. And does he even have a life? No, he probably doesn't have a life. On the flip side, you have, we'll call this guy Timmy. Timmy just chooses med school. It's still hard. It still takes a lot of effort, still a lot of work, but ultimately he's able to focus on one and deprioritize and not worry about the other two things that are ultimately creating drag in his time, focus, energy, and effort. So how I do this with myself, how I do this with clients, and how I'd encourage you to think about this is using what I call the triangle of priority. And this really just helps you establish what is the focus, what is the priority in your health, in your fitness. And really it starts with understanding what is the most important problem to solve. Now, if we look at the root of priority, or really just the definition, it is the fact or condition of being regarded or treated as most important. If you have 5 priorities, you have no priorities. And that's what most people lack. As I mentioned earlier, you lack clarity. It's having 20 different or 5 different things rather that you're putting 20% of your effort into, and that prevents you from seeing measurable progress in any category, despite doing as much effort as someone who's only focusing on one, which I know can be incredibly frustrating because I've done it in the past as well. So the fix here, you got to understand what you want and why. I'm going to break down how this triangle of priority really works. And it starts with, as you guessed it, a triangle. And at the peak of each of these triangles is going to be performance, longevity, or aesthetics. I'll dive into each one of these. I'll give specific client examples for each one of these. I'll show you how I've used it in the past, but just at a really high level. Performance is binary. It's measurable. It's a metric that is typically related to sport. Aesthetics is visual. It's losing weight, building muscle, losing fat, whatever that is. It's a little bit more subjective. It's a little bit more visual. And longevity is really just optimizing so that you can live a long, happy, healthy life, managing stress, and ultimately being 100 years old and playing with your great grandkids. So let's dive into the first one, aesthetic. This is the most common one. And like I said, this is going to be something that is visually driven around goals of losing fat, building muscle, increasing tone, definition. As I mentioned, they are subjective, but you can definitely measure these. And so here's an example of a client, Stacy. Her goal was to reduce body fat, to lose weight. And off to the right, you can see she started at a certain weight, lost, I think it was like 24 pounds. We have the measurables of different areas around her body. We have photos. We have how clothes are fitting. We have performance in the gym. Those are all different ways to see, oh, are we getting this aesthetic result? But with this, we're measuring aesthetic-based metrics. With this, we're prioritizing seeing improvement in that and not being worried about what her mile time is. When I was training her, I wasn't worried about how much she could squat. We were focused on the aesthetic component in that specific season. There can be other seasons, and we'll get to that in a moment. I'll give you another example. Ames, he actually had 2 seasons. So he said, I want to build muscle. And then from there, we went and cut him. So for 194 to 206, he's building muscle. We're seeing that in his photos. We're seeing that in his measurements. We're seeing that in his performance. His clothes fit differently, right? That's an aesthetic goal. So we're going to measure those things. Then when we go to cut, it's covered by the logo, but essentially you have a final weight of 184. So he ended up losing, I think it was like 20 plus pounds, but this is where he was at 194. This is where he was at 184. So with that, you have a complete change visually. And this isn't to get into, the internal change that happens in a transformation for someone on a physical level, but that's what we are optimizing for. Did he squat more weight? Yeah. Did he improve certain metrics in the gym? Yeah, totally. But we're optimizing for this. I'll give you an example for me myself. In 2020, no, this would have been 2021, I had a season where I really wanted to focus on aesthetics. So I built myself up to 202 on the left. I'm just a big, beefy boy right there. And then on the right, I was like, cool, let's get really lean. So I got really lean, ready for a photo shoot. In the process, dropped 30 pounds. But at the time, I wasn't concerned about my marathon time. I wasn't concerned about dunking a basketball, which are other goals that I've had in the past. And I'll get to those in a second. But aesthetic based goals are typically based in feeling confident in your body, feeling confident in how clothes fit, feeling confident in how you look in them. And so most fitness goals are going to be tied to some degree of losing fat and having a more aesthetic appearance with your physique. When we're looking at this, though, we got to make sure that we're prioritizing. And this is something I've been talking about. You got to prioritize specific things and measure specific things because that is what you are honing in on. That is the priority. So with any aesthetic based goal, nutrition is going to drive a large majority of that. So we want to look at calorie intake. We want to look at macronutrients. If you're training to build a bigger chest or a bigger glute, well, yeah, your training is going to need to reflect that. You're also going to need to sleep to recover from your training and make sure that you're not super stressed out from a calorie deficit standpoint and that you can adhere to the nutrition targets that you set. Stress management is going to be huge, making sure that you aren't emotionally eating because you're just absolutely maxed out from a stress standpoint. And then walking is one of like the easiest ways to create an aesthetic change, especially from a weight loss side of things, because it's a very low impact from a recovery standpoint and you can do it literally anywhere. So now let's dive into performance. A performance-based goal, as mentioned earlier, is a numerical goal. Running times, strength numbers, think how much can you squat, how much can you bench. That would be someone of maybe like a power lifter or someone who's a performance-based athlete, like a football player. They got to squat maybe a certain amount. Or maybe you just want to perform better in certain athletic events. Maybe you want to be a better golfer, right? So we're optimizing everything so that you can hit the ball further, for example. So with that, here's a couple client examples. Amy and Melanie wanted to run a 10K. So their training program reflected that. Instead of being in the gym 4 or 5 days a week, they were out running. Rather than worrying about what their body fat percentage was, they were more concerned about their training splits and their mile splits. So we've now made a little bit of a shift in terms of what we're focusing on, because at the end of the day, their goal was to hit a PR or to finish a 10K. Their goal wasn't to have a certain weight on the scale or be a certain body fat percentage. And it's binary. You either run the 10K or you don't. You either PR it or don't. As opposed to an aesthetics based goal, it's a little bit more of a feeling as opposed to, oh, once I hit 165, then I'll be happy, right? It's more how you want to feel in your body as opposed to a specific number. And this specific number will translate into how you feel. Here's a couple examples for me on the right, playing baseball. All of my training was optimized so that I could hit a baseball further, hit a baseball harder, and play a better catcher as my role as a catcher in college. On the left, I trained for a marathon. My goal is to run sub 3 hours. I ran 6 days a week. Didn't care how heavy I was squatting, didn't care about my bench. I was probably not a very good basketball player at the time because I was focusing on that one goal, which was what enabled me to run a 2:57 marathon, because I made that my sole focus and priority. And this would have been immediately before in the previous slide where I, did the photo shoot. I was focused 100% on the marathon, then changed my focus and chased a completely different goal, which is going to be a theme in all of this. You can have many goals. You just got to pick one, and you can have many goals that you achieve over the course of your life. You just got to do one at a time and really honor the season that you're in so that you can get the result that you're after. It's much easier to maintain a level of fitness as opposed to see progress in multiple areas at the same time. So one of the things that I found when it comes to performance-based goals, and I think a lot of clients would agree with this as well, and maybe you watching this, is that the pursuit of that specific achievement generates the confidence because you're seeing yourself achieve faster times, achieve higher numbers. And it's that feedback around progression and completion where you're seeing, wow, look at what my body is capable of. Look at what I can do if I put my mind to it. And I think that's really inspiring as opposed to looking at just a scale. And this isn't to say don't do that, but you see your body as something that it is capable of doing rather than being like, oh man, like my body's not good enough because it's not a certain number. It's not a certain waist size. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, I'm all for aesthetic goals. I'm all for performance goals. I'm all for longevity goals. but these can kind of help you understand why maybe you're not motivated pursuing one goal and why maybe another goal is more interesting for you. So, with a performance based goal, you got to have specific training for that. If you want to be the fastest sprinter in the world, you can't do a swimming program. It's not going to help. You got to have specific trainings tailored to your specific goal. With that, you got to sleep. You got to sleep, sleep, sleep. You got to recover, recover, recover. You can train as hard as you want so long as you can recover from it. The best athletes in the world sleep a ton because that's what is required for them to handle the amount of training that they are doing. With that comes stress management, making sure that you don't have a ton of other things in life that are creating stress. This could be work projects. If you're trying to PR a marathon time and have a newborn a month later, it's going to be a lot more stressful than if you're doing a performance based goal and maybe a less stressful time of your life. Calorie intake is obviously going to be very important. You can't just lose 20 pounds in the process of training for the heaviest squat that you're ever going to do. That's impacting your body's ability to hold and maintain as much muscle as possible, which you need for that squat. Macronutrients going to be very important. And then walking, again, it's going to be something that enables you to really get, I'll just say, like the recovery that you need, the time away. In general, walking is going to be something that I'm a big fan of. And if you're not walking, get up and move. So now, longevity. This is the third one, and there's a lot of different ways to split this, but I like to think of it as improving these foundational markers so that you live a long, happy, healthy life until you're 100. So anything that would cause stress to the body, stress to the system, that would prevent you from getting to that point because something breaks. Maybe it's shoulder mobility. Maybe it's blood pressure. Maybe it is a sleep schedule based on the work that you're doing that just isn't sustainable. So we want to look at longevity as a thing to optimize for. And I wanted to pull in this example because this is an aesthetics-based result that the client got. But the reason why he wanted to join the program and work with me is because he wasn't confident in his ability to maintain the amount of work that he was under. He wasn't confident that he would be able to get to 50 or 60 years old with the same essentially strategy or the same program that he had been doing. He was doing high intensity boot camp classes. His current diet wasn't helping him get his results that he wanted, and he had a really stressful job that was very high pressure, and so he needed something that was more sustainable in the long term. So we structured that, and in pursuit of optimizing his longevity, optimizing his recovery, we looked at nutrition, we looked at his training, and he was able to lose up to 30 pounds. But this was a desire based in longevity, which I think is important to understand what you want, but also why you wanted it. Yes, he definitely wanted it from a confidence standpoint, taking the shirt off at the beach, but sometimes it takes having a longer term longevity focused vision to be able to stick with it he's been sticking with it even now for almost over a year. Another client example, Brian. Brian's the absolute man. He lost almost 60 pounds. I think it was over 60 pounds over the course of a year. But his initial reason why he wanted to start with personal training back in, I think it was like 2018 at the time, is he had some banged up shoulder issues. He had some banged up knees. And so by focusing on healing that area and making that the number one priority and getting him training and moving again, then that unlocked him being able to see the aesthetic changes that he wanted. Right. And so it was a decision based in, I can't sustain this for a much longer time period. Otherwise, I'm going to run into bigger issues. And in the process of adjusting longevity, you're definitely going to see aesthetic results, especially if you have, 50, 60 pounds to lose. I'll give you an example for me. It has nothing to do with losing weight. In 2019, I got rear-ended by a trolley out in front of my apartment, and it totaled my car, and I couldn't move. It was very painful. My neck, my low back, all were really seizing up. And so I spent 5 or 6 months working with a breathwork coach, basically a spine specialist. And all we did was just breathing and core bracing and getting my body back to a point to where it can sustain, or not sustain, but really support my spine and have my core muscles work how they should as a symphony rather than an 8th grade band. And so that was all I cared about. At the time, I was concerned that I wouldn't be able to lift weights again because it was so painful. So I didn't care how much I squatted. I didn't care how fast I could run. I just cared about getting out of pain and being able to do the things I love doing for the next 70 years. Fortunately, I followed that program. I got the result. My spine and posture has never been better because I honored that season. Then after that 2019 period, that's when I did the marathon. Then after that, I did the aesthetics based goal, but I had to address this linchpin first. Otherwise, the other ones wouldn't have been possible. So, in this pursuit of really reducing stress to specific joints, to specific systems, I found that that's going to provide the confidence that you need, that your body is going to work how you want it to work and be functional for decades to come. So, with a lot of longevity based goals, you're going to see a big priority on stress management. And there's a term, I'll have another video on it, but it's called your allostatic load, which is basically all of the stress that comes in gets white labeled by the brain, and you can either handle that stress or you can't. You either get burnout or it's not enough stress on the other side of the coin to where you're not going to be able to adapt in a positive way. Sleep obviously is going to be huge to recover. Mobility is a big thing to look at with this. You can train as hard as you want, but if your mobility is inhibiting you from lifting certain weights, you're not going to get very far. Calorie intake, micronutrients, which is getting a little bit more into specific minerals and vitamins to really impact how your body feels, how your cells function at a really deep level. Digestion is another really good example of something to look at and focus on, to where you're saying, hey, maybe you're focusing on your nutrition, but you're optimizing for better gut health, as opposed to saying, oh, I lost 2 pounds, right? I would take getting rid of bloating and getting rid of stomach pains and maintaining weight over losing 2 pounds and having terrible stomach pain 10 times out of 10. So I think with all of this, just to kind of wrap it up, the question you got to ask yourself is, what is the linchpin of my health and fitness? What is the one thing that if I fix this, then everything else would unlock? And that's where I would start first. And I'll give you an example of one of my favorite childhood games, Kerplunk. There's certain, I forget what these sticks. You pull these sticks, and based on how the marbles are set, certain sticks would release a ton of marbles. You could pull some sticks and hardly any marbles would come out. But if you say, all right, if I pulled this stick, how do I get the most marbles to fall? If I focused on my longevity and focused on my mobility, everything else would be easier. Or if I lost 30 pounds, then everything else would be easier. And so understanding that, having clarity, what you want, why you want it, is really what unlocks you to be able to go into other areas and really explore what you are capable of from a health and fitness standpoint. So that's the video. Leave a comment if you got any questions or any other thoughts down below. And check out the next video. We'll be breaking down how to build your workout plan really from start to finish so that you have a really simple framework to follow. My name is Paul Klingen. This is Return to the Athlete. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.